The aftermath of the Potsdam Conference saw Stalin strengthen his position in Eastern Europe. Many countries, including Poland, Romania, and Hungary, now had pro-communist governments which were loyal to Moscow. In March 1946, Winston Churchill famously stated, "From Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste in the Adriatic, an iron curtain has descended across the continent." He was referring to the division of Europe into a democratic West and a totalitarian East, both of which were shut off from one another. The US and Britain now knew very little about what was happening in the Eastern European countries governed by Soviet-controlled communist leadership. In spite of Churchill's condemning speech, Stalin's control tightened over Eastern Europe in the subsequent 2 years.
Stalin saw the control of Eastern Europe as fundamental to the security interests of the USSR. In particular, the control of Poland was seen as vital. It had been the gateway for 3 invasions of Russia over the course of 150 years. The near collapse of the communist state following the Nazi invasion of 1941 convinced Stalin that the Soviet Union's safety could only be guaranteed if it was bordered by friendly governments. As the Germans retreated from Eastern Europe, the Red Army took their place, establishing control over several key areas. Despite agreeing to hold free elections in previously German-occupied countries during the Yalta Conference, the Soviets instead established governments of their own choosing. Stalin's reply to any criticism was swift. He proclaimed, "What can there be surprising about the fact that the Soviet Union, anxious for its future safety, is trying to see to it that governments loyal in their attitude to the Soviet Union should exist in these countries?" The dropping of the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki heightened the Soviet leader's security fears. To him, the action underlined the importance of establishing a buffer zone between the motherland and its enemies.
As relations worsened, the Soviet Union tightened its control over Eastern Europe. Any opposition in the eastern countries was sliced off bit by bit in what the Hungarian leader Rákosi called salami tactics. Eventually, the leadership of countries like Poland and Hungary was replaced by individuals chosen by the USSR. The new leadership was loyal to Stalin and would do exactly what he wanted. In 1947, an organization called Cominform was created to ensure compliance with Soviet wishes. All communist parties were expected to be a part of it. Cominform meetings were used to ensure each country knew what was expected of them and to criticize US foreign policy. In response to the Marshall Plan, which attempted to sway communist influence by offering economic and monetary assistance, the Soviets created Comecon. This was an organization that bound the Eastern Bloc together economically through a series of trade agreements.
Yugoslavia was a communist country and a member of Cominform, but it resisted Stalinist domination. The country's leader, Josip Tito, led his own army to victory over the occupying German forces in 1945. He had not been reliant on the Red Army to liberate his country, like many other areas of Eastern Europe. For this reason, Tito's policies were far more independent of Moscow. This greatly angered Stalin. After refusing to implement Soviet-style policies on several occasions, Yugoslavia was expelled from Cominform. The country was criticized by the other leaders of Eastern Bloc countries. Stalin sent assassins to kill Tito, but none succeeded. In fact, Tito wrote to Stalin saying, "If you don't stop sending killers, I'll send one to Moscow, and I won't have to send a second." The Yugoslavian leader would outlive Stalin and eventually mended relations between his country and the USSR.